There's something that's changed my kind of world is that my ears are more important than my mouth. In my earlier years, my mouth was very quick to snap. It was all very reactive, responsive, impulsive. Whereas now, as I get a little bit grayer, I realize that my ears are more important. That's something that's helped me in business. So if anybody walks away with one thing from this chat, it's listen.
Hello and welcome to Creativity for Sale podcast, a show to help you start and grow your life-changing creative career and business. My name is Radim Malinic and creativity changed my life. You see, I believe creativity can change your life too. I even wrote a book about it and it inspired this podcast. I've set out to interview the world's most brilliant creatives, designers, writers, musicians, makers and marketeers about their life-changing experiences with creativity. If you ever wanted to know how people go from their humble beginnings to the pinnacle of their success, our conversation should provide you with an intimate look into triumphs, challenges, and untold stories behind their creative endeavors. We also discuss the highs and lows of creative careers and creative life. So, thank you for joining me on this exploration of passion, creativity, innovation, and the boundless potential within us all. Let creativity change your life. Are you ready? Today's guest is renowned for his logo and identity work, just as he's celebrated for his generosity towards new generations of designers. He's on a mission to create free design education. He's an author, designer, educator, and all-around gentle giant with a huge heart. He's a human that helps other humans to thrive and grow. It is my pleasure to introduce James Martin. Hello, James. It's nice to have you on the show. How are you this morning?
I'm very well, my friend. How are you? You got a migraine? How's your head? Is it all right?
Trying to get things done.
No, I know. It's because you're a trooper, absolute trooper.
And at least we are nice and warm today because last time I saw you, I made you walk around 17 different blocks in Toronto in search of a breakfast.
You didn't want to pay. What was it? You didn't want to pay for your, what was it? The data roaming.
My data? No. It's not that. Not that I didn't want to pay for my data. I messed up my data.
Oh, you didn't have any data. That was it. Yeah. So yeah, we went. The place we were going to have food was literally next door to my hotel, but we went 20 minutes forward, 20 minutes left, and then 20 minutes back left again, and then we just did a square, which was lovely. But do you know what? It was nice to spend some time with you. I enjoyed it, but it was cold.
Likewise. And I normally go to all those trendy places in Toronto, and this time we had a breakfast with all the policemen and firemen and all the builders.
It was the equivalent of the greasy spoon in London, wasn't it?
It was fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And it was quite sort of serendipitous situation that we once upon a time used to live across the town from one another, didn't know about each other, and now we live just outside London. You used to live in Southampton, and we met properly in person in Toronto a few weeks ago. Design thinkers, and I was absolutely fascinated with the conversation that we had because we have so much in common, and yet we do so many different things.
Sure.
So what I want to ask is, how did you grow from a graphic designer to what you are today?
Just heavier is probably what I am today compared to what I was. Yeah, it's a great question. I suppose it's something that I never really planned. I think, obviously, quite a troubled, anxious teen years, childhood, creativity wasn't particularly celebrated. And then, I don't know how far back we want to go, but obviously found creativity as a bit of a safe space in my early 20s. And I had no fucking clue what graphic design was at that time. It was purely just a distraction from drugs, trauma, and alcohol. Do you know what I mean? It was just something to keep me on track. And over the last 2 decades, it's evolved. 40 now. So yeah, I've been trying, I would say, to different degrees, trying more and more and more as I get older, obviously. Over the last 2 decades, and I've fallen into more of I don't know what I am really now, some sort of weird hybrid thing that lives within the design world. I still do a huge amount of client work, but I also build a lot of courses and, like yourself, an author and a coach, try and offer as much free design advice as I possibly can on Instagram with, almost over 500,000 followers now, which is bonkers for a bearded twat who lives in Southampton. Do you know what I mean? It's bonkers. So I think it's just evolved. Patience, perseverance. The longer I'm in it, the more I realize what I have to offer. And that kind of purpose was very much client focused originally, but now it's very much I feel like I'm a designer that's trying to help designers every day. Yeah, it's a journey. And I don't have a fucking clue what I'm going to be in 10 years' time, but hopefully alive, which would be a good thing. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see, won't we?
I think when you mention, I don't know what I am, I think that's sometimes, the best possible way of actually reaching that in your career. Because when I think like beginning of our careers, we try to give ourselves all these titles because they are our identity. We go, okay, I remember like how, for example, I was a graphic designer, art director, illustrator. I wanted to do everything but I never really tried to dial up that purpose. Whereas when I speak to you now, it's like when I see your sort of public facing, your Instagram account and everything that you do, it's just heavily rooted around the logo design and the logo design community. But it's been fascinating to watch how you evolve with age and time by actually volunteering and actually giving back the information that people need to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned the right word. It's the purpose. And the purpose, would you say that was a game changer for you?
I think before purpose came survival. I think that was like the big thing for me in like many ways. Obviously, I think all designers or anybody who gets into any form of work, it's there to serve a purpose, which is to survive, isn't it? To be able to put food on the table, to be able to pay for bills, to be able to pay for mortgage, to be able to pay for children, family, or whatever it is. And I think once you get past the survival stage, I have this theory that every 5 years you evolve. This is not scientific fact. Please do not come back to me with some sort of biological thing. Yeah.
I think I've seen as every 7 years, but I mean, yeah, you're 5 or 7 years. I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, well, every like 4 to 5 years, I feel that I go through like this transition of where I'm always thinking like, what's the next big thing? Do you know what I mean? So for the first 5 years, it was very much survival, put food on the table. Is this a viable direction for me? Has this got longevity? Like I said, am I making any money? Can I survive? And then after survival, it went more into this, okay, well, now making money, clients are coming in. And then it was more so like, how can I add more of my personality into my work? How can I do more of the work I want to do? Starting to almost not necessarily say no to loads of projects, but we would say, like we were basically in the beginning saying yes to everything. And then a few more no's started to come in because they didn't really align with a budget or they didn't really align with the kind of work we wanted to do. And there's only so many kids' party leaflets you want to do when you're in year 6, 7 of your kind of career. And then after the next 5 years of doing that and diving into Baby Giant's 13 years old now, my agency. So at the beginning of that, it was still very much trying to put on this face of we have to be everything to everybody to get this work, and we have to say yes, and if we don't do it, we can find somebody else that can do it. Like I said, it's this survival thing even when I start the agency. But then as I've evolved, it's become, I suppose, it's that kind of slowly niching down into like not necessarily what I want to do, but who I want to be. And I think that's something that's been a big driver of me, especially over the last 5 years, I would say, is, okay, I've given a lot of my energy and a lot of my time and a lot of my effort to clients, helping them win, helping them survive, helping them live their dream businesses. And I was like, what do I want? What do I want to be? And that's when this purpose started to kick in with more about like giving back to the industry, and like creativity saved my life. And I know how powerful it's been to me and my family and how happy it's made me. And I want to gift as much knowledge as I can, or make whatever is in my head accessible through books or courses to help people in the industry. But yeah, purpose comes very much later in life, I think, because I had to figure out who the fuck I was first. I can't help anybody until I figure out who I am. And I think it worries me when I see a lot of like young, greener designers, we'll call them, kind of, niche down too early, or try, like, I want to build 100,000, make £100,000 next year, and I want 200 million followers. And I worry that sometimes the kind of need to be famous outweighs the need to build a career sometimes in today's kind of world. But, we grew up in a world without social media. So it's a bit different now. Don't want us to sound like two old farts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, we definitely might have the chance of sounding like a two old farts. But I think we had that. There's a lot of analogy. Great answer, by the way, and I'm glad that you admitted to make party flyers for in your careers, because when I used to live in Southampton, we used to have the joke that unless you've made a kebab menu design, you haven't worked in graphic design. And at least one kebab shop menu you have in your lifetime just to pay the bills. But the niching, I think, let's talk about niching for a second, because obviously you've got your niche. I don't even know what mine is anymore. Like I know the purpose, but like niching necessarily, it's a different story. But I was thinking before this conversation this morning about what I'm going to talk to you about, and narrowing down is such a hard thing that if you force it, it just might not even work. So you mentioning like the young guns trying to, especially there is lots of messages out there saying you need to find your niche. Whereas I remember I wrote this chapter in my first book, which was like 100 different styles, 100 songs. That was it, 100 songs. And it was like, there's an analogy from the music world that you need to make 100 songs in 100 different styles to even find what actually makes you happy. Because I just feel like the world out there is absolute Disneyland. It's like a pick and mix with all the shiny things, and everything smells and tastes good, but you can't have all of it on your plate right at the same time. And it's almost like just find that one thing that you really enjoy and then you really like, and then see where it takes you next. Because this is, we explore that through survival mode. And I can totally relate to just like paying £40 a week rent in Southampton. That was my survival. That was my enabler and a survivor. And I said yes to anything. Literally, like I was making tickets for people for their events, it was just random. But you learn to see like the journey from a kitchen porter, or like you're washing dishes, all the way to manage every single phase of how the business works, how it takes you through. Because when you have to go and fine tune of, if you fix a problem at a lower level, then you know how to do it. But I feel like there's a lot of messages in the industry which kind of wants to get people the leg up, which is fine, because it gives them the like, okay, this is how we can shortcut 20 years of a career, but not necessarily how to get the experience of 20 years. And so this is when I watch your courses, when I look at it like this, it's very honest and tells people like there's bricks, there's building blocks, and you have to build a foundation, because you can't just jump over that wall and be in that situation.
I think what you're explaining there, which is exactly what I think, is that when I started in the industry, I started at the bottom. I grew up. Do you know what I mean? I leveled up, but within my first agency, it was making tea. I wasn't really doing a lot of work. It was watching, absorbing, sitting in the background. But that was my place. That was where I started. And if you look at any apprenticeship, any other job role, doctors or whatever, you start at the bottom and then you earn the right to do X, Y, Z job later on. Where I think with the immediacy and the access to information and the get rich quick and the shortcuts and the quickest hack to blah, 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 there are people at the bottom claiming to be experts. Do you know what I mean? Because of maybe what they've learned or what they've been told, or maybe how they've been told that they should carry themselves in conversations and all the rest of it, where this journey has lost. It's called a career for a reason. A career lasts 40 plus years if we're lucky. Sometimes a bit longer if they keep pushing back the retirement age. But this idea of having to make it year 1, 2, 3 is bonkers. These are years for exploration. These are years for testing. And when we talk about niching now, I'm a big believer in that your niche finds you. Do you know what I mean? Your niche finds you with time, with failure, with figuring out what's right, figuring out what's wrong. I believe I've become a better brand designer, a better visual identity designer, a better logo designer through my experience of being a photographer, an illustrator, a tattoo artist, a web designer, an animator, all of these things that I've learned over my life to get me to today make me the designer I am today. But I was so many things. So out of a 20-year or 18-year career, say, so far, I've only really focused in my niche of like visual identity for the last 8 years. Do you know what I mean? So there's almost a decade there of learning, testing, trying, figuring stuff out, knowing or figuring out what I didn't like to find out what I did like. There was a big journey to get to that point. And I think that particular journey, because of all this conversation around niching and finding your purpose, do you know what I mean? Following your passion. Following your passion is the shittest advice to give to a 20-year-old. Do you know what I mean? Because personally, I don't like to generalize, but it's shit. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't think you know enough about yourself. I don't think you have tried enough things to know what your passion is yet. And I think, as I said, your passions evolve with you and they reveal themselves, and purposes, they reveal themselves over time. And they're a reward for patience and perseverance, I suggest.
Yeah, I can tell you that more than 20 something odd years in the industry, I still don't know what I'm passionate about. I know what I'm obsessive about, what makes me curious, and but why my passion is such a strange word and such a strange category and label to put on things. Because what's interesting in this conversation that you and I started in the industry around the same age. So I started late. I started around 20, 22. And we get the young guns who are teenagers and they talk about brand strategy and stakeholders. And you're thinking, those are your age, like this is your age of innocence. Just, it's nice that we have democratized the information that people can actually get the idea of how the world of business works. Because I went to study economics at uni just because I was good at maths at that time, and I realized I need something to my name. But no one in my life was a graphic designer. No one was like doing the work that we do now. Whereas all you have to do now is to open Instagram and type in logo designer, and you can see all these hundreds and thousands of people who are logo designers who are making this very much a career that you can see what it might be as a sort of end result. But I just believe like the age of innocence is just like, that playground, that sandpit, like just exploring and actually be and fail. And not even like, you don't see yourself failing when you're 20, especially we didn't see ourselves, making a party flyer, kebab shop menu as a failure. It paid the rent, but that was a little success. That was a little win that was to be celebrated. And I feel we just sort of, all of this on steroids, when it just feels like, okay, you have to make some imaginary $1 million a month or $1 million a year, like some sort of subscription service. Like, it's easy to follow because that's what human nature is. We think that we can borrow and make it fit for us, but it's only about the honest expression of what is it that you can actually do, what you can add to the universe with your offer, and how does it align with other people's souls? Because I think what I've got from you the most is that it's who you are. It's not what you project to the universe. And it's just a genuine expression of what you do and what you create and what you believe in. And that speaks volumes over some multi-technical, full stack development as whatever, like job title with some complicated website. And I think that's been sometimes lost in the ether and the messaging right now.
Yeah, very much so. But I also think that is down to the access of information. I don't think there's been a time in history where access to information and people has been greater. Do you know what I mean? I don't like to keep talking about us growing up, but it was impossible for me to look at the Draplins and that. I had no idea about all these people who I now know and I look up to. So I was never comparing myself to anybody. There was never this competition. It was purely, like I said, survival. Like, how can I work today to get to tomorrow? But now what's happening is with all this access to people, information, and people seemingly everybody's successful on Instagram or YouTube or whatever it is, it's impossible not to feel that you're not enough. And even do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm doing some brilliant things. I'm way further than I thought I'd ever be in my life and career. If you talk to James 20 years ago, if you told me I was going to be here, do you know what I mean? James would be like, "God, crikey, win!" But like, even now, I'm like, "What's next? What's next?" I know that kind of evolves with purpose and mission and all the rest of it. But like this need, because you can constantly compare yourself to what you see others doing and how others are doing it. And I think I'm a little bit older now, so it's easier for me to be able to stay in my lane, shut that out. But 10 years ago, it wasn't as easy as it is now. And I think this comparison imposter, which I think is involved in, especially creativity, like creativity for us was a private thing, or for many artists going back into like the early 80s, 90s, 2000s was still a personal, you would draw in your free time and that artwork would be seemingly probably seen by some friends, or maybe somebody might buy it, or even like when I started working in design, it was for my local village, kebab shops, party shops, do you know what I mean? Like pubs, restaurants, menus, all the rest of it. And then now that work is for the world to see, not just my local village of 3,000 people, it's the world. And I think that adds another level of stress and pressure to people to like, and everybody's seemingly, it's funny how the playing field gets leveled on social media. Like people might look at like you, for example, or me, or your Draplins, or your Paula Shares, or anybody like that, and then suddenly think, oh, why aren't I that? But then these people have been in the industry for 20, 30, 40 years. Do you know what I mean? But the person of year 1, 2, or 3 is thinking, I need that. Do you know what I mean? I need that now. Do you know what I mean? But they're possibly not willing to do the 20, 30 years to get there. Possibly. I don't know. I don't like to generalize too much. But I think comparison I think that's the biggest issue I see for our world as creative people, is this little nugget, which when I was growing up as a fresh screen designer, I didn't have that struggle of, look at that person, he's needed.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that sometimes you feel these things again, like sometimes you don't know what your enough is. And that is such a hard thing to come by, because I was trying to sort of write about it, define your enough. It's very hard to aim for enough, but it's okay to actually get to the point of realizing what my enough is right now. I know it now. It took me 22 years to find out what my enough is. And it's so easy to go through emotions of like, especially with the quantified creativity, you got your likes, you got your platforms, you got your followers. And why is somebody with something that you seemingly think is its worst style of work or quality with double the followers? You're thinking like, is the world fair or unfair? But you realize the universe works in its own way. Like, it doesn't matter. If you live your own life and style, then that is enough, because that will actually show you the ways of actually where you should go and what you should do next.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was literally, you caught me just as I was about to lead. But it's funny how what we perceive those numbers and those likes to mean, isn't it? Because like you say, it's this immediate, like if you have more followers, you must be better. Or if you have more likes, they must be better. Whereas I know people who aren't on Instagram, for example, making millions. Do you know what I mean? And I know people on social media with hundreds of thousands of followers and got their work. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's this weird perception that I think you can, the dream is to have both, isn't it? Ultimately, to have an audience and to have, but ultimately the reason that we're all in this is to work and survive. Like, this is the way I look at the kind of Instagram world and the social media world, or marketing platforms, as I like to call them. Everybody's just trying to survive. Everybody's just trying to make it. Everybody's just trying to become something to someone. Nobody's doing this because there's an end goal to the things that they're doing. Whether it's, some people might want fame, some people might want more clients, some people might want to build an audience and then be able to do paid ads to then survive, or through that kind of money, or whatever it is. But everybody's just trying to be something to somebody. But it's funny how we look at a blue tick, or we look at at the amount of likes or the amount of comments or the work, and then associate the work with the amount of following and think like, why haven't I got that? Like, why am I? Do you know what I mean? But it's the funny how these things don't, like this, just because I've been going noodling around this idea of just, there's a big difference between a design influencer and a designer with influence.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? There's a huge difference between those things. And there are a lot of design influencers out there who don't do a lot of client work, but they make their money on through the size of their audience, through doing paid ads for many, many people. And they do a little bit of a splattering of client work when it comes in, but they're not busy studio. They're not busy doing groundbreaking client work, where there's also designers who have influence, people who design all day, every day, and are actually doing the things that they're sharing with people every single day. So I just think this kind of number to success is such a weird, like, is it a paradigm that we're kind of in, where we kind of...
James, I think what you're trying to describe, I think when you think about social media, it's been designed to make us feel anxious. It's never like, social media is never completed. Like, we're never going to say, okay, I just added all the photos, I've completed my 30s of my social, I've added all the folios, I've added all the followers, everyone who knows about me is here. It's never designed. It's always an open book. It always changes. It's designed to make us anxious, because either they're playing to our sort of primal instincts of, like, there's a good analogy about pigeons, that if you give a pigeon a food every hour, it will wait for the food. If you withdraw the food every other hour, it'll start pecking at the food every other hour, a lot harder, because they will think that the food's not coming ever again. And that's pretty much the same way with social media, because, I've just posted something. Obviously, the best thing would be, I'm going to focus on something else. Like, it's doing its own work, like, just leave it there. But of course, 15 minutes later, let's see if you got any likes, if this, and let's see anyone replied. And it's just, we have created these tools that somehow, like, try to template one fits for all sort of solution to such intricate careers and intricate journeys, that we live in a different ways, we think in a different ways, we follow similar pathways, we follow similar roads, but we have different ideas. And we try to sort of squish them into this sort of plastic box of a phone, or sort of what it's called, sort of metal, steel, or whatever now. And we try to say, like, okay, I need to fit in. I need to fit in into this formula. It needs to work for me. And of course, some people have done amazing things. And you're a great example of, like, how you can amplify your voice and your persona for those platforms. But it's equally possible to actually just live in a pre-digital world or pre-social media style sort of working practice. And as you said, I've got friends just like yourself. I've got friends who make incredible work and money, but any social presence, they focus on the C-suites and the boardrooms, and that's where the stuff is made, because their longing and their gratification comes from somewhere else. Like, they don't need necessarily the likes on the screen. Their longing is in financial remuneration. Like, for them, we do the things we do for different reasons that stem usually from our childhood, from our anxieties, from our some sort of insecurities, being a survival mode. I don't think anyone's naturally greedy, like, I think it's more about, like, how you feel insecure, that sometimes making something out of nothing can make you feel literally like Usain Bolt just smashing that sort of record on 100 meters, you feel like a gold medal winner, you're fully on top of the world. Because with creative work, I just feel like it's sort of amazing mixture of dopamine and ambition, testosterone, endorphins. Like, you made something out of nothing, someone liked it, and they got you paid for it. That's so much better than making a burger and passing it through windows. And I feel like the social media doesn't always fit it, because we live differently, we think differently, and we feel like we should be all having the same impression, same likes and same stuff. So I think that kind of brings me on to your sort of current career, or current sort of variation of your career right now, which is a coach. So we'll talk about your courses in a minute, but how do you advise it's good for us to chat about things that we know now, but how do you advise the young and new on this kind of stuff, and how does it work?
Yeah, I wouldn't say, I would say probably more guide. I'm not qualified. I believe I understand the industry. I believe I've got a finger on the pulse with reference to what clients expect, and also a good balance of business and marketing skills, where I can guide people in a direction that would hopefully bring them better results. But I think it all started when, well, we both grew up in a world where it was quite difficult to access information. Like I said, you start at the bottom, and then you learnt as you grew, and a lot of the time you had to figure it out for yourself and then fall forward ultimately. And when I jumped into this social media realm, like properly, about a decade ago, just over a decade ago, that's when I started to share my work and share my ideas and share my process. I realized there was such a reaction to it, like people almost craving this kind of behind the scenes background knowledge of like how to create ideas. And this was almost something that they hadn't seen before. There were people possibly doing it, but maybe not online, or maybe not in the way that I was doing it, maybe to the detail, or maybe within the niche, the logo design niche or whatever. So yeah, it was something that gained traction. And the more I started to do it, the bigger it grew. And obviously that has evolved from purely design, logo, process, visual identity process into more business mindset and stuff like that. And for me, it was very much kind of just trying to learn as I was going with that, trying to understand that, I was learning this, like when I was talking to a lot of designers, they were all having the same problems. And I was thinking, well, maybe this isn't interesting to build some content around. Do you know what I mean? So the conversations I was having started to turn into ideas for books, ideas for courses, ideas for content. Because I was thinking, like, there's like 25 people like this week who've told me they're all struggling with design process. So why don't I create a post about design process and help those people? So that's kind of how it escalated to the point of where it is now, where obviously I've decided to, a couple of years ago, I built my first course, which came out just after the book. And it was a world that I never even contemplated getting into. It wasn't something that was on my radar. It was, again, like with time, perseverance, patience, the audience was growing, or the tribe, as I like to call them. It's definitely not a cult. It's more of a tribe, An audience is something that, I don't really like the word audience, because I feel like a community is, an audience is me on stage and everybody looking at me. Whereas I like to feel that I've created more of a community where everybody feels they're safe. Do you know what I mean? It's a place that people can talk about their prices. It's a place that people can talk about their trauma. As a Chucks, I share a lot about sexual abuse as a child and my struggles with addiction and drugs and alcohol. And I like to believe that I've created a safe space where people can be themselves. And that's something that I've learned that's been really, really important for me. And so when it comes to this guide, coach, educator, that's something that I try and lead into a lot, which is the importance of story, the importance of being ourselves. There's obviously the go-to tools and techniques and processes to building businesses, to strategizing marketing, to creating content, to making money, pricing work. But I don't think any of those things are achievable without the right mindset. I know this is something that you're big on and you're an advocate for, which is this, we've got to be, the more I work on myself, the more effective I become to everybody else. And which is why I feel that niching too early is a mistake. This is why I feel that putting yourself in a box too early is a mistake, and I think there's so much we have to learn. And I've always had this kind of mindset of like, if I'm struggling with anxiety, or I'm struggling with loneliness, or I'm struggling with confidence, or I'm struggling with anything, I go and learn about it and I go and read about it. And I've had counseling myself, do you know what I mean? To try and understand the way I think. And these things have catalyzed my growth because I understand the importance of understanding myself. So now I know this, it's very much easier for me to be able to become all I can be. Like, I understand that I'm the only person in the way of becoming that. I understand that I'm going to die. Do you know what I mean? And death is a fantastic motivator for me because it's something that we've all got in common. I'm not going to say no to an opportunity because it's comfortable to say no. Do you know what I mean? I'm always trying to push comfort zones, all this kind of stuff. So so when it comes to this kind of educational guide thing, it's very much design focused. That's where my success has been. But I work very hard on trying to get people to understand the importance of like creativity, business, and mindset is kind of where I land, because I think you have to have all three to excel, personally.
I mean, the point about understanding yourself, it comes to us naturally. We hear it a lot, I need to know who I am and what do I stand for. But it takes a journey, like a long journey, to actually work those answers out, because you might have an impression thinking, oh, I know right now what I stand for, but it's just a momentary thing. Like actually what you are is the sum of many parts that actually add up to your sort of experiences, your personality that make it happen. And I just like that you actually said that you've guided, you're not a qualified coach, but a qualified coach is just someone who went to a facilitating program. Like they know how to do this, like there should be some sort of rules, but I think we are all guides to one another, because it's the human aspect that makes you understand how to actually work with other people, how to actually deliver for other people. Because what you mentioned, the understanding of the design process and how things are made and stuff, it's necessary. It's like watching a game of football and knowing, okay, so that's how they cross the ball, that's how they did this, that's how the pass goes in. But it's not until you do it, until you speak to a person, like why does it work that way? Because you can replicate something. I can pick up a guitar and I can replicate a chord I can see on YouTube and go, okay, well, that's the chord. What do I do with it? I need to understand, how do I connect it to someone who will say, what is that chord? That makes me happy. Like, why did you use it? Or how do you play it? How do you strum it? It's understanding how we actually use these sort of ingredients, because why do we even get new cookbooks every year? There's 20, 30, 50, 100 of them every Christmas. Well, we've had the same food for the last 300 years. We haven't invented new animals, new vegetables, anything. Like, it's how we sort of actually through our curiosity, inventions and evolution, how do we go forward? And I think that's the part that I think makes it more interesting, because if you open yourself to saying, I don't think I'm doing it right, because I think that's the struggle, because no one wants to admit it, like, I'm not doing this right. Everyone thinks this should be okay because I'm doing something what looks like something on Instagram or somewhere on the internet, but it doesn't stick. I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting the right clients. Something's not quite right. But you're going to blame everybody else for your mistakes, not yourself. And I think flipping that mirror and saying, actually, I need to be better. I need to understand myself better. I need to understand my childhood traumas, which I personally didn't know till my 40s, actually, when I was your age. For the last 5 years, I had the biggest tumble drive of experiences of finding out that the most of my first 40 years of my life were pretty chaotic because of the first few years of my life, So I didn't even know that. And I thought I was riding this cloud called graphic design, creativity, illustration. That was my prop. That was my excuse. That was my excuse to drive myself to the ground, because that was my way of dealing with some sort of traumas that I didn't even know properly that were there. So it's that thing. I think that's where I can say now that I know who my enough is. I know I can feel more comfortable, and the world around me doesn't feel like a competition. It feels only like a people I can potentially connect with, because I'm finally comfortable with who I am and what I do and how it's done. And I feel like you are just on the cusp of being there yourself, kind of going, this is my true expression. Because we live in such a weird sort of middle league of creativity that there's no defined sport, yet we somehow feel like we compete with each other. Yet we say we want to encourage each other. It's such a sort of complex cocktail of emotions and insecurities and anxieties that we can do so much better at it. And coaching, I think, is something what you do. And I think it's something I might consider in the future, because I think you're doing great work on this, because you help them with the groundwork, saying it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to do things the way you do, because the longer you do them, they will start working. They will start actually clicking.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the things you mentioned there, which was this kind of relearning, rethinking, it's a process that I go through with every project. Do you know what I mean? Like, how can I speed this process up? It's almost like this kind of self-evaluation thing, which is, for example, like very recently, like I've had my kind of like my process for creativity, my visual identity process, which has been solid and rigid for so long. And it's been great. Do you know what I mean? It's allowed me to execute. It's allowed me to be as creative as I possibly can. Like, I know exactly where I am in the project at all particular times. But as I've grown, my process has grown. And like even today, very recently I tweaked a part of my process where, I used to lean into sharing, like I used to have like a very heavy, like exploratory kind of discovery phase with my clients and then lean into one idea based on everything that we learned. But recently I've evolved that into sharing some very early stage sketches as the first part. Do you know what I mean? To just make sure that I'm aligned with the vision, with the audience, with the purpose, with the client, just to get a feeling of, am I in the right? And this is something I added to my process like 6 months ago. Do you know what I mean? And it's helped the client relationships. It's helped to get my clients more involved in the project. It's helped me speed up my projects. Do you know what I mean? Like, and this is something that maybe someone who is stuck in their ways wouldn't change because it's always worked this way. And it wasn't that it was broken before. It's just that I found that there was a better way. I was like, maybe if I just tweak this bit, it might actually save me a bit of time on the back end, which it's done. And it's made my life so much happier. And because it also makes me realize that I'm not right. Do you know what I mean? And I actually really enjoy not being right. I love having difficult conversations. I love speaking to, and this is something I actually actively do on social media. I follow people I don't agree with because I don't want them there because I want to agree with them. I want them there so I can learn to evaluate whether the way I see the world is right or not. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like this game I play with myself to keep myself evolving and thinking. And I surround myself with very, very good people, but I use social media as a tool for rethinking and relearning. Like I said, I'm actively following people that annoy me a little bit. Do you know what I mean? Like, why do they annoy me? Like, why does what they say annoy me? And like, how can I use this? And sometimes they've changed my perspective. Like, I've spent time, I've watched them, I've read what they're about, I've followed their story in more detail. And I've actually come to really, really like these people. I don't agree with what they're saying all the time, but it's really good to get that different perspective, because I think the problem is people are it becomes very tribal, doesn't it? I follow this person and I'm going to do what this person says. And then if somebody says something bad about that person, I'm going to tell them that they're bad, even though I don't really know what I'm talking about. Do you know what I mean? So this kind of having varying perspective has been a huge thing for my growth. And like I said, like understanding that I'm not right all the time allows me to evolve, allows me to tweak, allows me to change, which in turn makes me better, I think.
I think that's the issue, because when we start in the creative industry, we tell ourselves we are right about everything. We believe that everything we've created first round is right, And I had the experience of employing a junior designer, and it was like, we were, the exploration phase was almost not there, Which is like, okay, well, this is the answer. When you don't know anything, little knowledge is dangerous because you think that's right. Because you're like, I grew up in a way that nothing was ever good enough. And that's what I've brought to myself, what was brought with myself into my creative career. I should be celebrating every little small win. And we just don't, because it's never good enough. You always try to push yourself for more. So when you see people's work, it's almost like, where do we align? Because you get people who think they know everything without knowing anything. And you got people who know everything and potentially have done necessarily that bit of truth for those people who know very little. And they misalign. So, I can only agree with you with what you said about following people that you don't understand. I would say don't understand or haven't known enough about, because it's in the past, my insecurities, I would say, for example, I would make my opinion about people who were lovely. And I would think, Jesus, who's that person, And vice versa. Like my insecurities would make me feel arrogant because I was just trying to stay away from situations, even though I put myself in a public view. So it's just that, I think it's just that experience of actually just being open and just like approaching things with, what? Let me listen for a minute. Let's just see what I can find out. Because I think that's where the magic happens. Like, I remember watching this video about John Mayer, and he said, I'm going to talk to you for an hour just so you know nothing about me, because everything you've learned about me is from different signals and different stories that are not necessarily true. Let me just tell you who actually I am, or just to get to the conversation where you actually find out who I am from what you want to know. And I think that's what social media is, a distracting model, because no one's themselves on social media. Everyone's a bit jollier, everyone's a bit happier. Right? You get some people who are honest, and you kind of thinking like, I don't know enough about you to find out the right reason, because I'm sure some people are still searching for likes and followers.
Of course.
But yeah, I think it's just like how you approach your daily life by wanting to know very little and just actually getting to know the information as it comes rather than making your opinion.
Yeah, it's an interesting. It is an interesting thought, isn't it? It's very easy to judge people you don't know nowadays.
Yeah, I think just when people sort of, sorry for jumping in, but I think just when you talk about sort of tribalism and what James Ryan calls footballification, like you're happy to stand up for someone even though you know them too much, the sort of the little fights on like the brand new, the forum about new logos and stuff. And it's all very petty. It's all very unnecessary, that sort of chat about like, oh, crikey, for 100 grand, they just changed the color. Like, well, wait a minute. They had to go and look at the whole brand architecture, working out how it all works to make sure. Whereas from your little mind, from your little experience, you're thinking you should be paid 100 grand to change a color. You don't know what exactly was behind it. But it's that easy mindset. Like it takes ages for us to grow up and know our stuff properly. And when you think about this, like we will never stop from speaking until we know what we need to say. Obviously, it's the journey of getting things wrong all the time until we say something which actually potentially is quite right. So,
yeah. Sorry, yeah. The one very quickly, I was taught, and something that's changed my kind of world is that my ears are more important than my mouth. Do you know what I mean? When in my earlier years, my mouth led. Do you know what I mean? It was very quick to snap, quip, wit. Do you know what I mean? It was all very reactive, responsive, impulsive. Whereas now, as I get a little bit grayer, I realize that my ears are more important before this kicks in. That's something that's helped me in business and helped me in especially this kind of education like space. Like I wouldn't be able to do the things I'm doing without listening to the problems that other people are having. And everybody has slightly different tweaks to certain problems. But yeah, ears, if anybody walks away with one thing from this chat, it's listen. So you actually hear. It's a very difficult skill to do.
There's something I've brought from anxiety coaching that was one thing, just literally just don't jump in, because it was my insecurities, especially at the early age of design career, when you get asked, so you're the creative one, tell us what's the answer. I'm like, you try to finish people's sentences, what you said, making jokes and try to be, because we want to be accepted. But I want to talk about for a second about your book that you published. Was it 18 months ago, 2 years ago?
Yeah, beginning of 2021, I think, yeah.
2021, so I've got it right. Great book. And what I wanted to say, you told me in a conversation in Canada that you don't feel like writing another book, that you don't know what to write it about.
Yeah.
However, I follow your content, the things that you put out there, your courses that you put out, there's 3 or 4 different books to put out. I feel like there's someone who's learned how to distill ideas and build them into books now. I mean, I'm on book number 6. I'm starting writing 7, 8, and I've got another 2 or 3 ideas.
I've seen your Disney drawer of ideas. I know how many books you've got in your locker.
Oh yeah, I've showed you my phone. Yeah. I had to actually. Yeah. I mean, yeah, but that's because when you open the doors, and if you spoke to me after my kebab shop menu design, I'd be like, what bugs? I would never stop designing. I would never start writing. But I'm fascinated. How was the book for you? Did it feel therapeutic? Did it feel like sort of mid journey process? Isn't in a way like this is stopping my career? I believe you were approached by a publisher to actually make a book. Is that right?
Yes.
How do we go?
Yeah. So I think, Rockport, Quarto, I think they're now reached out. I know you know them. So yeah, for me it was, I mean, people say never, but the book for me was, I think there was a a load of different, like I was drinking a lot when I was writing that book. I wrote it obviously very heavily during COVID, which was very lonely. The stuff I write about in the book about trauma and the kind of obviously the sexual abuse I experienced at the age of 11 was, I probably opened a lot of Pandora's boxes when I didn't have the opportunity to have an outlet. Then I was like locked in my office, locked at home, drinking shitloads, writing a book, trying to process trauma, trying to write it in a way that, just the whole kind of process for me. This isn't a book about trauma. It's a good book about kind of creativity and a lot of other stuff. But like for me, it's really important to share my story and show. I always like try and, like whenever I'm sharing content, whether it's a talk or whether it's in the book, I always try and, even if it's a logo or a visual identity online, I think the stuff that happens before the thing that you're seeing is more interesting than the thing you're seeing because there's a story to it. And I try and bring that element of storytelling to everything I do. And maybe when I said to you that I wouldn't write another book, it's maybe I just don't see another book in me right now. Do you know what I mean? I don't feel that that's a vessel that, I don't know. I see myself dedicating that amount of time to. I mean, I'm not like a genius like you where I can figure out all of these ideas in months. Do you know what I mean? For me, as a dyslexic and as a kind of somebody who does struggle to articulate his thoughts, although, like, I must admit, the best thing that ever came out of that book was my ability to distill the information in my head into something that is what I would usually do in 1,000 words, I can now do in 100. Do you know what I mean? And that is what the book has allowed me to do, is how can I make this extremely difficult topic easy to remember? And maybe there are other books. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I need to speak to you about self-publishing.
I think there are. Look, James, you're only on the book number 1. When I did my first book, I was like, never again. Like, this is not going to happen again.
Yeah.
But then I'm quite actually, I really appreciate your admission about how you wrote the book, because I wrote my second book mostly half cut.
Yeah.
I wrote it in a year when we were renovating house, had a marriage counseling. It was the heaviest year of my adult life, like going through counseling, like going through so much therapy.
Yeah.
And I would just get a couple of Western, so I say it was Western, Henry Westons, I think, like a really strong cider.
Yeah, 7%. That's the stuff that used to get me going. Yeah.
You don't have to get much to feel a good time. But yeah. I was motivating myself. I was literally like, I was writing things I wanted to happen in the world, if that makes sense. Like thinking, I want this to be, I want this, that to be. And it was therapeutic. It was absolutely therapeutic. Whereas every other time I wrote things sober.
Yeah.
And it's just because I'm more at one with the ideas. I'm more at one with, this is how it is. And I mean, how to draw a line, how to turn into a circle, how to turn into a shape.
Yeah.
And that's the same with the words, like you write as much as you want, and then editor can cut it down and help you how to summarize it. And it's a journey. And I'm 5 years ahead of you. And yeah, I just feel like if there's one thing that I want to do, is just to actually formulate what you're telling the world in a way that they can put in their pocket, take it home and read it when they've got the right time to actually to connect with it. Because when you said I allow myself not to be correct all the time, it's just sometimes the content that you read, it's already behind you, or sometimes it's ahead of you. Sometimes you feel like, I don't particularly get this. I remember buying CDs that I didn't particularly like, but you persevered for a year. Oh, I love this album now because I just know you align with that content. And I think that sort of happens because your thinking and your knowledge is there. It's just that how do you put in the right time and how do you put in the right shape? And, because I feel like, for example, courses to me, I just feel like you can't hold it, you can't touch it. I've got lots of courses I've purchased for myself, for my learning and development, but you can't thumb through it. You can't put you can't underline stuff. You can always print stuff out, of course, but it's that the reason why the books are what they are for the last hundreds and hundreds of years is because of the nature of it. Like, it's not going to go away. It's not what's will ever change for years to come, because there is a reason why we've invented them and why they exist in the way they exist. So yeah, I'm really thankful for your honest admission. And I mean, look where it got you now. It's definitely worked out in a way where, I think sets you on the path to where you're thinking and what you're doing courses. What's that plan for the next thing? There's many more courses than I can think of already. There's a book, there's followers, daily reels.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, like the purpose, I mean, the big vision for James, of the world, I should say, is free design education. That's my vision. There are going to be stages and steps and processes to get to that, and variations of. But that's the big vision I have for the impact that I want to leave on the world. Is trying to make information as accessible as possible to people all around the world, so they can then support their families and support their communities. Now I understand along the way I have to look after myself as well, so that it can't just be like a free for all. There's going to be staged processes and staged offerings, I'd imagine. But for me, this is something that I am not rushing into. I know it's what I want to achieve. I know it's going to take, I think, a decade. I'd like to say in a few years' time, I'm going to have something. I would say that maybe a year's time, I'm going to have something pretty solid up. I know there's going to be iterations of that for the next decade or two. But that's the thing I'm spending a lot of time, like with my clients, funny enough, I'm spending a lot of time trying to figure it out first before I dive in. I'm spending a lot of time right now noodling around. Because I've right now, like Made by James, Baby Giant, I've got a business partner, but I very much lead everything. Getting 90% of the client work. I build the audience. I've done all of this by myself. Do you know what I mean? I've got Made by James, Baby Giant to where it is alone. I've had some help. I get help with some work and stuff, but ultimately by myself. I know the next thing I want to build in the world, I cannot do alone. It's going to be impossible for me to do that by myself. I need help. I need guidance. I need support. I need investors. I need people on my side who share my vision, believe in me, and want to come and take this ride with me. Now I have conversations with people lined up where these things are going to come into fruition, and this is the stuff that I'm spending time with over the next few months, is aligning people, aligning opportunities, trying to find the right people to help me. Because there's loads of people out there that can help me, and loads of people who want to help, but not all of them are the right people. So that is where I'm doodling over the next, I would say, 90 days to 6 months, I would say, is just making sure that, again, these foundations are built. It's built with the right intention. It's built in a way that has longevity, and it's built to support me and the people it was built for. So that is where I am right now. It's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? But I don't stop until things do happen. So it's just a matter of just, like I said, I don't want to rush into it. Old James would have already started it already and then figured it out as he went. But the new James is a lot more intentional and methodical, because he understands that is way more powerful when done right.
I think that's just a sign of growing up and growing stronger and more resilient and more knowledgeable, because I love the quote by Abraham Lincoln. It says, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I will spend the first 4 sharpening the axe. It's just like,
yeah,
the old me would be doing exactly the same, just jumping into things. And I think this is why we need those different stages of our careers, of in our lives. You need to do things ad hoc, gang-ho, crazy, fail quickly, fail early, because just work it out. Don't think about stakeholders and KPIs.
Yeah.
Just do things. But to build longevity, every quick idea needs the fermentation process. You just need to go and let it sink, let it marinate, let it throw it around, and then find out if something is going to stay here for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I loved hearing about your sort of free education idea when we were getting the top-ups of coffee and a greasy spoon.
Yeah.
Was it called Sunset? Was it called something called Sunset?
It was definitely something.
Yeah, no,
maybe
I
our Toronto friends listening will know. So I think it was a chain.
No, because I told it to a friend of mine, because I saw him that the same afternoon. I saw him. I was like, oh yeah, that one. Yeah, I know about that one. But yeah, no, I love having these conversations with you, because it's just, I think we are on a similar paths, but I always enjoy come into this with an open, like with a clean mind. Just I want to learn about, I don't know about you because I can see everything you post into the world, but it's the thinking behind the work that's showed me who you are and how you think and what you want to bring to the world. And your sort of 10-year journey of bringing free education is great. And I think in a way, getting the right people on board and collaborating with people who try to do similar things, which I've heard from others that wanted to do something, it's just a sort of a sign of how much our industry has changed. Because I remember going to my very first design talk in 2005, going to see a big name designer, and I literally was like disheartened how rubbish and egoistic that was. And I was like, things have changed. Like we are so much more open. I think who we are as humans make this better. And, there are shortcuts that you can take as a young designer to grow more mature, not before the experience comes, by following conversations like these and following people like yourself to know that it's okay to open up and say, you know what, I may be rubbish at this, but I'll admit it. And that will get me somewhere further rather than try to be in the corner and pretend that the next big assets to a Fortune 500 company. James, thanks so much for making space. Thanks for bearing with me at the beginning with my migraine.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, mate. It's always a pleasure chatting to you. Always a pleasure.
And I think it's the first of many. Thanks very much. And we'll have to have another one very soon. To carry on and see where your next chapter takes you.
I think we could speak all day. I'm ready for number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Do you know what I mean? We'll maybe have more chats than you have books out one day. It's open. Do you know what I mean?
Well, let's make it happen. I can do what I can do. I mean, with my publishing schedule ahead.
Enough. It'll be fun.
Don't you worry. Nice one. So much. Thanks so much. Good to see you. And speak soon.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of Creativity for Sale podcast. The show was produced and presented by me, Radim Malinic. Editing and audio production was masterfully done by Neil Mackay from 7 Million Bikes Podcasts. Theme music was written and produced by Robert Summerfield. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the podcast, please subscribe and leave a rating or review. To get your own action plan on how to start and grow a life-changing creative business, you can get a copy of Creativity for Sale book via the links in show notes. As always, keep those creative fires burning, and until next time, I'm Radim Malinic, your guide through this exploration of passion, creativity, innovation, and the boundless potential within us all.